Hello, and welcome back to Alice Talks Football, and welcome back to another live Manchester United news, transfer news, takeover news show. And we've got lots of information coming in, got more and more updates on Dan Ashworth to United, Fabrizio Romano giving some positive news, lot of indications looking very positive in regards to Dan Ashworth joining United, even one report saying that personal terms have been agreed, although we will give a bit of context to that report because I always think you have to take a bit of info with a pinch of salt at the moment because Man United clicks media, but very, very positive reports on Dan Ashworth to United. But breakingly so, unless you've been living under a rock, Ratcliffe's takeover deal was officially done, approved, and agreement was in place today that Ratcliffe can bring has the acquisition of a 25% stake in United. But what that also means is the Glazers are no longer in legal control of Manchester United, in particular football operations. So massive week in terms of Glazers losing control, the 25% stake being done, approved, and now that 25% stake is done and approved, Manchester United can go in their march for Dan Ashworth, potentially someone like Paul Mitchell down the line. And finally, we're going to get a bit more clarity and information on what the vision of United is going forward, the transfers. If we can get Dan Ashworth, bish bash bosh done, what a statement, him and Omar Barada in, all of a sudden, United can get to business. So we're going to get right into today's video. We're going to get right into all the info. I'm falling asleep a bit today again, which is a bit of a problem, but I should be fine. So please hit the like button. Please do subscribe if you're new. And let's get into the news. Let's go share my screen with you guys. So this was obviously the one that came out yesterday, and then it was officially approved by the FA today. But the Glazers are no longer in control of Manchester United. Surgeon Ratcliffe's acquisition of a 25% stake of Man United has been approved by the Premier League board yesterday, and today, Valentine's Day, it was approved by the FA. So essentially, the deal is basically done, and the Glazers officially no longer have sporting control of United, which is brilliant. And obviously Ben Jacobs himself has also confirmed that the FA has now since approved Surgeon Ratcliffe's 25% stake in Manchester United. And for me, this is massive. I think we know that we need the Glazers gone. We know that they ultimately won't be gone, but they're losing control. They're losing power. Omar Barada's coming in. Dan Ashworth's coming in. This hopefully will be the beginning of big needed changes at United as well. The United Muppeteers have just come out and said next will be a look to agree conversation with Newcastle for Dan Ashworth as well. Lots of reports coming out saying that United are pursuing and pushing for Dan Ashworth as they look to obviously maybe agree a compensation fee with Newcastle so Dan Ashworth can start right away instead of having to do things like gardening leave. We are going to talk about Dan Ashworth. We are going to talk about what he'll bring to United. We are going to talk about the latest news on that, but I want to talk quite positively around Manchester United going forward. Manchester United has lacked a structure, a competent vision for years. I remember Laurie Whitwell did a report on United, and he said that one of the things that left Brailsford most stunned when he went and spoke to those at Old Trafford was the fact that there was no leadership there. There was no one really knew what their clear role was. No one knew what the common vision was that they were working together. It was just make money. There wasn't something that the Glazers had told Bertrand and Arnold, this is what they've got to achieve. There was no defined roles, no leadership, no values. And Brailsford's come in to get to know the club, to get to know the ethos with the like of Blanc and Ratcliffe and say, look, we want to establish a way that we want Manchester United to play. We want to establish a vision at United. We want Omar Barada to be the CEO, to do the financial side of stuff. And then we're going to get the brains behind the success of Brighton, West Brom's most successful era, changes in the England camp, the recent success of Newcastle. We're going to get the brains and Dan Ashworth to put that together is ultimately what is believed to be the plans there as well. Would love to see how quick Man United transfer targets change in terms of reports. All this news makes me want to see players we get linked to more under the radar. I think because you've got to remember, even though Omar Barada's done and Dan Ashworth could be done the next week, I still think give it a month until though Dan Ashworth is officially confirmed, if he's confirmed, before taking transfer targets seriously, because I think that we won't have any credible transfer links until mid-end of March. I think that's when we'll get an indication of coming out. But it'll be interesting to see who we're linked to, if anything goes under the radar, if potential targets change as well. But it is really big, really positive news coming out. So let's get into the latest on Dan Ashworth, shall we? I feel like we're all Dan Ashworth out. I think we've heard that word a million times today, but this is the latest news and information in regards to Dan Ashworth joining United. It was said and confirmed that Dan Ashworth has agreed terms with Manchester United and told Newcastle that he is leaving. Now, that's come out from Footy Insider 247. Footy Insider is very much a take with a pinch of salt source. I wouldn't think that Footy Insider is particularly credible. So, although Footy Insider are claiming that Dan Ashworth's agreed terms to join Man United and told Newcastle he's leaving, and apparently Man United are now moments away from agreeing a compensation fee to bring in Ashworth, and Ashworth could be United Director of Football in the next 2 days, is what some reports are saying. They are very much take with pinch of salt sources, jumping ahead of the gun. I do think that there will be media exaggeration and a lot of media reports on Dan Ashworth to United, because ultimately it's going to get clicks. It's Manchester United. They like to milk it. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think if Ornstein, Romano, Whitwell or someone more credible comes out with information upon this, then you can believe it. But I don't trust Footy Insider. It's got to come from Ornstein. It's got to come from Romano. It's got to come from one of those trusted journalists for me to believe that we've agreed terms and that Ashworth's agreed to join United officially. There's been terms agreed. It's just coming from Footy Insider, that information. So I always say, take them with a little bit of skepticism, a pinch of salt. It was then said that Manchester United are confident they can prize Dan Ashworth away from Newcastle United to become their next sporting director. And that was come from Shah Dunker, who I believe is a Newcastle-based journalist. And then obviously Fabrizio Romano did add to the matter that United close to appointing a new director of football, and United will hold formal talks for Ashworth soon. Romano was almost suggesting, not saying, he's just saying we're close to appointing a director of football, but suggestions there from Romano saying that Dan Ashworth to Manchester United could be very, very close. Breaking news has just come out now, guys. As I'm saying that, as I'm talking about Ashworth, breaking news is just coming out on my screen here. Let me get this out here. We just got a breaking news update on Ashworth that's come out this second from Simon Jones of the Mail, who is a good source of information. So Simon Jones just come out with this story this second, that Manchester United and Newcastle are expected to reach an agreement over Dan Ashworth by early next week. A formal approach from Manchester United is being prepared for the sporting director, and a swift conclusion is the preference of all parties. Now, Newcastle don't want to lose him. Newcastle are not going to make it easy. But if he's gone to Newcastle and he's told Newcastle he wants to come to United, if he has agreed personal terms with United, potentially agreed, then Man United and Newcastle have got to negotiate to get this done. They're probably fed up with the rumours, the links. And Manchester United will maybe have to approach Dan Ashworth, get the final details done, then speak to Newcastle about a compensation fee, a gardening fee. There's now reports coming out from many sources, including credible sources, that actually Ashworth to United is under swift conclusion. There's been communication. Some reports are coming out. There's been communication behind the scenes where Ashworth and Manchester United have an agreement, and now Manchester United are going into talks with Newcastle to deal more with the compensation on stuff. So it feels like this Ashworth news, it feels like this Ashworth stories are really going to heat up as well, with the Mail Simon Jones saying a formal approach is expected, with this deal potentially wrapped up in the next few days by the beginning of next week, which would be absolutely massive. And you've also got the Muppeteers who've had inside information throughout this whole takeover, revealing bits and bobs as well. And the United Muppeteers have been saying the latest on this is that next we'll look to agree a compensation with Newcastle for Dan Ashworth. It's the hope they can bypass a long gardening leave. Manchester United want Ashworth to come in. Manchester United want Ashworth to come work for them right away. So they don't want to be having to do some long gardening leave deal for Dan Ashworth. So there's actually a feeling, reports that Man United be ready to agree some kind of compensation as well. I do want to get into Maguire's interview, his comments on Ineos coming in, the changes that are expected. Gary Neville had some insight on Delo, but Dan Ashworth Bomber is coming in right now as we speak, basically saying that there's a feeling that this deal will be done next week. As we speak, this is coming in now. So lots of breaking news coming in on Dan Ashworth this second, guys, as well. Can you imagine finally having someone who gets summer business started before the window opens? That would be absolutely brilliant. It might be a bit slower this year because this is the first year of them coming in. They need to get into place. But imagine this. We've gone from Murtagh and Arnold and Woodward and Judge to then Omar Barada, best in class at Manchester City, Dan Ashworth, best in class in British football, people that are wanted by those at the top. You've got someone that has a proven history of, establishing the club's dream vision and building the structure and sustainability around the club in Dan Ashworth. You've got a great CEO in Omar Barada, that does all the financial things needed. And you think we've gone from the clowns of Woodward and Judge to proper people coming into United. It feels like this is the start of change. No more buying players that sell shirts. No more buying 30-year-olds and panic loan deals. Let's have this vision. Let's have this way we want to play. Let's play attractive football. Let's let the new era of Manchester United begin. And that will be so positive. Dan Ashworth will bring us good tidings and great sporting IQ. I've got a detailed report coming out tonight. If you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you subscribe, because I've got a really detailed report and video coming out tonight, which is going to tell you everything that Dan Ashworth would bring to United, what his role would be. I've literally spent like 6-7 hours today just doing research on Dan Ashworth, writing down notes about what he's done in the past, what he'll bring to United, what his role will be, and why he's so good for United, and why he'll change United. So do subscribe, because about 10 p.m. tonight, I'm going to have a 10-minute video. It's literally 10 minutes of what Dan Ashworth's going to do and why he's going to be perfect for United. So do subscribe for that video. But I do want to get into more news. Obviously, sort of the end of Glazer control, Ineos deal being announced, but obviously Dan Ashworth breaking news is coming in as we speak. And what's sort of been said about Dan Ashworth in this new Manchester United era was that Dan Ashworth, if he gets the job, will have influence over other appointments within the recruitment department. And we spoke about this earlier. He's a big admirer of Sam Jewell, Brighton's head of recruitment. He could bring him in to work with him. Obviously, Paul Mitchell's the one that most linked, but obviously, Brighton recruitment, can he say no to that? And then interestingly, Kevin Felwell, who's Everton's director of football, and Dan Ashworth said he is the best director of football this country has produced. The Brighton CEO even said that Dan Ashworth is the best director / technical director in the world that he's worked with. And then obviously, reportedly, Dan Ashworth was really excited and likes the idea of working with Omar Barada, which is maybe more reason for him to come to United. Gardening leave or not, we all wanted to sort out senior staff members, so this would be mega. It's not the end of the world, but we need to top up. Would be great start. 100%. This is, for me, the best option as well. And I see people being negative. Oh, what's Ashworth won? Why are we bringing in Ashworth? But it's not about what people have won. It's about bringing in the best in class when you look at what they've done. If you look at football in general, Kevin De Bruyne didn't win anything before Man City, really. John Stones was at Everton before Man City. They look at all the players at Man City and what they've won and where they were before. Liverpool's title-winning team, they brought Robertson from Hull. They got Van Dijk from Southampton, Mane from Southampton. It's about getting the best in class. The guy that is laid the foundations for where Brighton are today. Brighton are where they are today because Dan Ashworth laid the foundations, created the structure to suit the owner's vision to establish Brighton as the club that they are today sustainably. He has been doing that at Newcastle. He created in New England. He's got history in developing academies. The academy, the class of 92, is incredibly important to United. We've got our best academy era ever, and he will be focusing on developing that academy. He's a guy that has been described by those at Brighton as the best sporting director, described by those at Everton as the best sporting director. He is so highly rated for a reason. It's not, but he hasn't come from Barcelona or Man City. What does he want? It's about how he's transformed West Brom, how he's transformed England, Brighton and Newcastle within such a short time of being there. His proven track record, his ability to watch football. This is a guy that watches football. I was speaking to someone about him that actually sort of knows me, but that know him, and say he would just sit there and watch hours and hours of footage to look at these players, to see what these players were. This is a footballing man. This isn't a banker. This is a pure footballing man in Dan Ashworth as well. GGMU, everybody coming in, smash the likes if you're excited because major updates coming in on Dan Ashworth to United. Obviously, Glazers officially lose power of United today and all of that as well. There's a silly man on Twitter making silly tweets saying it isn't done, the Ratcliffe deal, la-di-da. There's idiots on Twitter still saying that Qatar are coming in and Qatar are going to buy the club for clicks. Look, they're the same idiots that told us we're getting Frankie de Jong and Jurriën Timber, the same idiots saying that the Ineos deal wasn't done. Trust me, when all Sina Romano say stuff, 99% of the time, that's because that is done and all of that as well. But we've got more coming in on Dan Ashworth to Manchester United, more breaking news coming in here by the Mail, and then we will get into some other stories and we'll talk about Dan Ashworth and what he'll add. But it was said that Dan Ashworth wants to move to Manchester United, and if a compensation package is agreed, there will be movement in regards to Dan Ashworth to United in the coming days. There's been no fallout, but it's for the lure of the project of Manchester United and his relationship, and this was something we mentioned in my live stream earlier, his relationship with Brailsford has pursued him to move on. It's been said that Brailsford has a very, very good relationship with Dan Ashworth. We know that Brailsford and Dan Ashworth are very, very close, and that relationship could potentially lure on that deal as well. People, please do hit that like button. Please do subscribe down below if you're new. So close to hitting the 78,000 subscriber mark. We're 25 subscribers away, so I would really appreciate new people subscribing to the channel if you want to stay up to date with all the latest Manchester United news, transfer news, and more. Ashworth was involved with England. He knows his stuff as well. And yeah, 100%. And Ashworth off the pitch, Hoyland Garnacho Mania on it. Let's go United. Positive vibes going on as well. But continuing on, we've got lots and lots to talk about. Brailsford going to be a big part of persuading Ashworth to come to United, and it's obviously been said on Dan Ashworth that Dan Ashworth is seen as the best in business by Sir Dave Brailsford, and the focus of his remit would be recruitment, which is interesting because there has been other stories coming off as well. Alice, Dan Ashworth won't go on gardening leave, as it was reported. United will pay more compensation so he doesn't have to, like Newcastle brought him. Yeah, Newcastle paid a $5 million fee, so he didn't have to go on gardening leave, and I think that's what Manchester United will be talking about in regards to sorting out. I think that's what Manchester United's focus will be. Now, I did a little bit of a tweet and gave some insight on Dan Ashworth to United, which I'm going to read out to you guys. I did a lot of research and I've got a big video coming out tonight, so do subscribe for that, about Dan Ashworth's interview, what he said about how he would change United and more. But I said this earlier. I said Dan Ashworth would be game-changer for Man United. He was described by the Brighton CEO as the best technical director he'd worked with. And why is Dan Ashworth so highly rated? So you've got to remember, in 2007, Dan Ashworth, who was working as an assistant manager for the West Brom youth side, was spoken to about taking up this new role at West Brom, which was a technical director, sporting director, something that wasn't very common in football in 2007. And the goal of that role was to basically establish a sustainable structure that would keep West Brom in the Premier League, to build the foundations of the medical department, the sports science department, the men's team, the women's team, the recruitment, to keep West Brom sustainable in the Premier League. He was obviously at West Brom for 5 years, and in those 5 years that he was at West Brom, he resulted in a lot of him developing the academy, him bringing in some bargain players. But West Brom got 11th and 10th place finishes. They spent 8 consecutive seasons in the Premier League, while seeing players like Wood and Berahino come through the youth, while also maintaining the second lowest wage bill in that era. And Dan Ashworth would watch countless football matches and scouted players that were so key to West Brom, bringing them in for bargain fees, which was so crucial to West Brom's best era of success. This is where Dan Ashworth started. And obviously when Dan Ashworth left, Stuart White of West Brom said, "Only when Dan Ashworth is gone do you realise how good he is." That was what was said on Dan Ashworth. In 2012, Dan Ashworth got his new big job in terms of going to England and changing the DNA and the culture of England. He started with the youth setup of England, instilling a DNA code into the youth with the vision of only the shirt size changes as the players go through the England ranks. Not only this, but he introduced more youth sides at youth level to increase competition. And essentially, what happened was England had a bad culture. They had great players, bad culture. Fabio Capello didn't do very well in tournaments despite the team and players that he had, and Ashworth came in to basically change the culture of the England camp, establish an England DNA, work on the youth to develop the youth players of England, so the young talent that come from England have the right attitude and personnel. And Southgate, after England made the World Cup semi-final in 2018, gave Ashworth a lot of credit for this new culture around St George's Park. You look at England since Ashworth's come in, the under-17 Euro, they won the under-17 World Cup, they won the under-20 World Cup, they won the under-19 Euros twice. I think they won the under-17 Euros as well, so the other 20 Euros as well. You know, England have reached World Cup semi-finals, European finals, and in that time as well. It was England's best period. But I think where Dan Ashworth is most notably known is when Dan Ashworth moved to, of course, Brighton. We all speak about Brighton as being this fantastically well-run club, and Dan Ashworth was a big part of that. Dan Ashworth moved to Brighton, and Tony Bloom, the owner of Brighton, had this vision of what he wanted Brighton to be, and he trusted Ashworth to instill that, Ashworth to run certain operations of Brighton, to instill that vision, and that was for Brighton to be more than a Premier League club fighting to stay up. He wanted Brighton to push higher, which is why he brought in Graham Potter. Brighton just stayed up in the Premier League, and Chris Hoyton just kept them up. And people were saying it was harsh. Why was Chris Hoyton sacked? But Ashworth had this idea of how he wanted to play. He spoke to the manager, the new Brighton identity. That manager wasn't going to do that. Graham Potter was. So they brought in Graham Potter because they had this vision of how they wanted Brighton to play. And he then built this extensive scouting network at Brighton that thrived and utilised data. Some of the best scouts. He completely changed the scouting network of Brighton to scout these certain kind of players that were going to fit the way that Brighton were going to play. And Graham Potter was going to coach that. And while doing that, he also focuses on the academy, developing the talent. Ben White, really successful loan to Leeds, and then they ended up selling him on to Arsenal. You know, Davison Sanchez and obviously recently Everson Ferguson have come through. And it wasn't just about recruitment, but it was about improving the youth setup at Brighton and also just creating a vision and identity. You see, De Zerbi's walked into Brighton and been very successful right away. And while De Zerbi's a very good manager, a lot of that is a result of Brighton have their way that they want to play. Brighton have brought players to play they want to play. They then bring in a coach to do that because they've got every single structure in place for that coach to thrive and succeed. At Manchester United, it is the polar opposite. We have everything set up for Ten Hag or any manager that comes into Manchester United to fail. We don't set up the right structure. We don't set up this and that. We don't have that instilled. Brighton have everything set up so the next manager that can come and will succeed because they already have a way, an identity, an established way, the right players, the right culture. United is the polar opposite, and that's what Dan Ashworth will do if he comes to United, which is everything that is needed to be done at Manchester United. You look at Brighton now, they're now in Europe, they're now one of the most sustainable models of football. Even when Graham Potter left, they had the recruitment and structure in place, as I said, for De Zerbi to come in. And while we can talk about notable signings, Trossard, Cucurella, Casado, Matoma, many of whom have been sold for large profits, it's more about actually just Dan Ashworth leaving a sustainable model and vision at clubs to build off and be in a good place for years to come, to reset the culture, change the culture, as well as recruitment. And whether it's been West Brom, England and Brighton, Dan Ashworth's implemented successful policies at all of those clubs he's had that then saw those clubs go through improvements. And in the short term, he's been at Newcastle. He's been there 18 months, 2 years about now. You've already seen a massive overhaul of the Newcastle Academy, bringing in key people. Lewis Miley coming through, but he came in, he brought in key signings like Botman, Pope and Isak right away. Bruno Guimaraes as well. I don't think he was here when they really got Bruno Guimaraes, but you saw Newcastle go from 19th to 4th place within 18 months. That is absolutely crazy, particularly in the Premier League, because he brought these players that fitted Eddie Howe's identity, the way he wanted to play, but also helped change the culture of Newcastle and played a part of that because it was so toxic under Mike Ashley as well. And I think why I think Dan Ashworth would be important for United is more his focus and experience on changing the culture, his focus on developing academies, the youth set up, his history, but also the fact that he's used data extensively to scout the best talents that suit the manager's vision, which is needed at United. Because if you look at Ten Hag worked well with this great structure around him at Ajax. He had Overmars. And if United can recreate a great structure around Ten Hag with Berardi, with Dan Ashworth, the recruitment being there, the vision being in place, the identity being in place, there's every chance that Ten Hag could come to Manchester United and genuinely succeed, in my opinion, as well. Judy said Alice Brailsford's instrumental in this deal. The fact he got Omar in his has turned his head to show Ineos wants to be serious. Yeah, we have to give Dave Brailsford credit. I wasn't super familiar with Dave Brailsford or Dave Brailsford's game at all when he came to United and he was appointed by Manchester United, but Dave Brailsford is key in Manchester United landing deals like Omar Berardi and potentially Dan Ashworth coming to United because of his good relationship with Dave Brailsford as well. And what a job he's doing as well. It was said that Dan Ashworth wants to move to Manchester United, and if a compensation package is agreed, there will be movement in the coming days. There's been no fallout, but the lure of the project of United has attracted Dan Ashworth to go to United, and his relationship with Brailsford has persuaded him to move. Not only did Brailsford do a big job in persuading Omar Berardi to leave the Manchester City group for Manchester United, but Dan Ashworth wants to move to United because of his relationship with Brailsford. He's been persuaded, and if United and Newcastle can agree a compensation package so he doesn't have to go on gardening leave, Dan Ashworth will become the new director of football of Manchester United, is what reports are saying right now. And that Dan Ashworth is seen as the best in business by Dave Brailsford is also reports with the Daily Mail, Simon Jones saying that recruitment is Ineos' number one priority with the rebuild of the stadium secondary. They want to find a better balance to recruitment than what has been achieved in the past, and have identified Ashworth as the new ideal lead to the recruitment. And not only will that be recruitment of players, but Ashworth at Newcastle already recruited 17 new scouts for the academy. Ashworth at Brighton already recruited scouts to look and use data to find to do South America, to do extensive data analysis to bring the right players into Brighton. You know, Ashworth established that Brighton scouting network, or was a part of establishing that, and that's probably what they will want maybe Ashworth to do at United is establish that as well. Alex said, any coincidence that the involvement of Ineos and recent moves off the pitch has led to improved results and performances on the pitch with Caesars being unbeaten in 2024? Potentially, but I think a big part of it is Luke Shaw came back, Martinez came back, not for long, Casemiro came back. I think a lot of key players came back. I think now you've won a few games, there's a bit of confidence and belief, but maybe a bit more positivity and certainty around the club. Maybe the fact that the players know that they're fighting for Ten Hag, the players know that if we don't get results between now and the end of the season, Ten Hag will go, and I still generally believe that the most bulk of the squad want Ten Hag to stay. I think Maino's importance has come. Martinez and Shaw were big parts of those wins. Casemiro wins. I think it's a multitude of the players know they've got to fight because Ten Hag's job is essentially on the line. He's on trial now. I think key players coming back. I also think that we've got one game a week and that's going to massively help us. I think there's a multitude of things that could result in terms of United's performances improving as well. Alice Ashworth already has connections with Ineos, being good friends with sporting director Dave Brailsford. Exactly. Sounds like good news. Is Ashworth coming? Nothing's approved, nothing's official, but breaking news is giving very positive signs that if United and Newcastle can agree a compensation package, Ashworth will be done. That is what the news is giving very positive signs of as well. Mayno energy as well. Mayno coming in has been massive as well. Guys, please do hit that like button. Of course, subscribe down below if you're new and share the video. We're on 77,975 subscribers. So we are 25 subscribers away from 78k. It'd be amazing if we could hit 78k today. So please do go and subscribe down below. If you're new, would be massive as well. If the structure's good, we can win anything. And what did Ten Hag do with a good structure around him at Ajax? Ten Hag was incredibly successful when working with Overmars, when working with a good structure around him at Ajax. And I think, while I don't know what the future of Ten Hag will be, because we know that what Dan Ashworth did was he did sack the manager when he came in at Brighton. Obviously, Newcastle sacked Steve Bruce very, very quickly. I do think that if Ten Hag is given a chance and given time, there will be a lot of positivity around him as well. More and more info coming out as well. Craig Hope's also saying that Manchester United expect to make other appointments quickly after Dan Ashworth joins. The club is ready to move early ahead of summer targets. And there's now reports coming out that Manchester United expect Dan Ashworth to join. And Craig Hope of the Daily Mail was probably Newcastle's best sort of source of information. This is one of the best Newcastle journalists, arguably the best in terms of source of information. And they're saying that United are expected to make other support appointments quickly after Dan Ashworth joins. And they're saying quickly after Dan Ashworth joins. Very, very credible sources from the Newcastle camps. Very, very credible Newcastle journalists are suggesting that United will do this. And they're saying after Dan Ashworth joins, it's almost becoming this sort of feeling that inevitably Dan Ashworth's going to join United. We don't know if he will join United. There's always been questions. Will he leave Newcastle? Will he stay at United? Will he leave Newcastle? There's always been big question marks around it. But now the news and now the sources and now the information is very much coming out and suggesting, look, Dan Ashworth, when he joins United, and United will then go for other people. Omar Barada, Dan Ashworth is just the beginning of this Man United project. And this has come from Craig Hope of the Daily Mail, which is a very good source of information when it comes to Newcastle news as well. So yeah, 100%. With the right people on board, we can finally get the big names we want, like De Jong, De Ligt, plus others. Yeah, I guess so. I don't know if we need De Jong or De Ligt now. I mean, De Jong I'm absolutely in love with, but I'm actually weirdly, and maybe this is me, obviously De Jong's De Jong, but I'm not too bothered about going for big names in the transfer window. I don't know if this is just me, but I think the way Man City and Liverpool have done it in the past was Liverpool went and got, as I said earlier, Van Dijk, Mane from Southampton, Robertson from Hull, Trent came through the academy, Alisson and Salah came from Roma, Firmino came from Hoffenheim, Wijnaldum came from Newcastle when they were relegation side. I look at Liverpool's rebuild and they just got a lot of players that were Premier League players for mid-table sides that were young and could be developed. They've got a few players abroad for good value for money. And I'm not bothered about United going for De Ligt or going for De Jong totally anymore. I mean, I'd love Tchouaméni. I want United to be doing those 40, 50 million pound signings of players like Elise, like Neto, like Braithwaite, young players that are good in the Premier League that we can develop into superstars. John Stones came from Everton, was turned into a world-class centre-back. Could that be Braithwaite at United? You know, you look at other deals that City had done. You could also go over to someone like Julian Alvarez that's very young coming through. You could go and get De Bruyne from Wolfsburg. You can get Diaz from the Portuguese league. You can get a lot of other players. Nathan Ake, who's been fantastic this season, came from Bournemouth. Kanji from Dortmund. Gundogan came from Dortmund at the time, and Gundogan was key. You look at just Rodri coming from Atletico Madrid. I don't want United to be going out there and actually be focusing on players like De Ligt and De Jong that are very obvious names. I want United to do smart business. I want to see someone maybe like Mats Wiefer come in, that 6'8" hybrid profile. I want to see maybe a Pedro Neto Elise type if they can stay fit, because Elise is unbelievable if he can stay fit. I'd love to see a really good support striker come in that's going to, have a bit more experience than Rasmus Højlund, good backup to Rasmus Højlund that maybe we haven't heard of, that ends up being a really good signing and only costs 25 million. I want to see the Braithwaites, the Todibos, the Lenny Euros, the Antonio Silvas be explored. I want to see United go for players that are currently in the Premier League, players that are currently young, players that can be developed into superstars that might not cost more than 50 million, players that aren't going to demand more than 100k a week wages. I don't want United going for, De Ligt on 200 plus k a week. That's, 26 now. I'm not as bothered about Frankie de Jong as I used to be. He said no to us the first time round. His wages are ridiculous. As good as Frankie de Jong is, we've got Maino coming through. We need a number 6. We need someone that can play as a 6, that is physical, that can cover a lot of ground, that is, we need a 6+8 hybrid. Maybe that's Yusuf Fofana. Maybe that's Herman Nice. I want to see United have this new approach in the transfer market, which is what Liverpool adopted under Michael Edwards that got them success, which is what Man City did. And we're just going in for good young talents that aren't on ridiculous high wages, that aren't considered superstars, that players in the right system, with the right vision, with the right coaches around them, have all the abilities to be superstars. You look at Lisandro Martinez, he wasn't a superstar, but arguably he's our most important player. When we signed Bruno Fernandes, he was in the Portuguese league. He wasn't a superstar. But Lisandro Martinez, Bruno Fernandes, for me, are two of Manchester United's best and most important players. Then we've got the youth players coming through, Garnacho and Maynard that are key. We signed Højlund for, who would have been 50 million, who wasn't a superstar, but I think Højlund will be a superstar. You look at United's players now that we want to keep. You look at the players that we want to keep. They're not players that we've big name players. They're players that we signed that were young, that we want to develop into stars. Delo could be one that's developed into a star. Well, he was 16, 17 million quid. He's been playing really well right now. I'm not interested in going to Barcelona, going to Bayern Munich anymore. I want to go to teams where they've got this brilliant player that has the right attitude, that will play the way the manager wants to play, that is a very good player that will get better and can be developed. Because I will tell you this about Ten Hag. Ten Hag can't improve bad players, but Ten Hag can improve good players. Ten Hag is a ceiling raiser. Ten Hag isn't the best at getting the best out of average players, but Ten Hag is very good at getting the best out of great players. And I want to see players with the potential and abilities to be great coming into United. That is how I would look at Manchester United. That's how, if I was in charge of Man United, I would want to personally change the recruitment myself. Obviously, I don't know what your thoughts are. I don't know what your vision is on that, but that is exactly what I would do right now at United. Guys, please do hit that like button if you have not already, and of course subscribe down below if you're new, if you do want to stay up to date with all the latest Manchester United news, transfer news, takeover news, and more as well. We need signings like Højlund in all positions, I agree. Just hopefully won't overpay. It actually was a leak, and I don't know if you read the leak, but the leak that came out basically said that Rasmus Højlund would have cost 50 million, but Atalanta saw that Man United came in like idiots and managed to charge nearly 72 million if you include add-ons for Rasmus Højlund, but he would have been 50 million. We need Rasmus Højlund, but actually getting him for what we pay for him, not spending crazy ridiculous money as well. Guys, please do hit that like button. Of course, subscribe down below if you're new. Reports are coming out that a Dan Ashworth agreement will be done next week. Dan Ashworth set to be the new director of football. Agreement expected next week is the reports coming out, but I do want to dive into more information. I do want to dive into more info because there is lots and lots and lots to get through on the channel. It's obviously been said that Dan Ashworth is seen as the best in business by Ratcliffe, and that is why he's so crucial to United. He's so much what United want, and he is the number one priority. They want to get Dan Ashworth in. Big stuff coming up on that as well, and recruitment and then owners out, massive things that would have a great impact on us. Improve the recruitment, get the right structure in. Hopefully Ratcliffe will eventually buy out the Glazers, and this can be the start of a new big era at United. Evan Ferguson or Victor Gyökeres. I love Evan Ferguson, but I think he'll cost us a fortune. I think value for money will go for Victor as well. My phone is ringing, but I'm live, which is annoying, so I'll answer that after my live. Please do continue to hit the like button. Of course, subscribe down below if you're new. I also want to get into some interesting things that Harry Maguire has said on Ineos coming in and Ratcliffe coming to United. And Maguire said this. He said, Ineos has arrived, so Jim Ratcliffe, and I'm sure he will have a positive effect on the club. As a player, I want this club to be successful. I'm sure he'll perform an important role in helping the club get back to where it needs to be. Harry Maguire then said on Jim Ratcliffe that the expectations of this club are to challenge for the biggest trophies, which hasn't been the case often over the last 10 years. I'm sure he has a vision of what he expects this club and that we will move in the right direction. Maguire then said on the Ineos message, the guys came away from the meeting impressed. Everyone is motivated and wants to fight for the badge for this club, and there will be this new story. It's an exciting time for the club. So Harry Maguire again speaks very, very positively of Ineos, and as someone said earlier in the chat, Could United's performances being better partly because of maybe that boost of Ineos coming in? They finally feel that maybe things are going to change around the club. We're getting the right people in. The recruitment's going to change. The Glazers are no longer have control or power. The Glazers no longer have control. Maybe there is just a more positive vibe and culture around United right now. They will seem quite impressed with what they've seen from Ineos, but of course they're going to be wary because the Glazers are still here. Will Ineos be able to do everything they've said they're going to do? Actions speak louder than words. But it seems to be a much more positive environment now around United since the Ineos camp has come in and all of that as well, which might reflect on improvements in performances as well. Other news coming out that Wayne Rooney's trying to start a boxing fight as well. Interesting news coming out. Craig Hope did say that rapid conclusion on Dan Ashworth to United is expected soon, and that is desired by both Man United and Newcastle as well. The fact that Manchester United, someone said here, the fact that Manchester United are making such decisive decisions and going right for Dan Ashworth after bringing in Omar Barada is a massive statement from Manchester United. It shows that they aren't mucking about. Ineos truly want the best in class, and this is the perfect start from Ineos. Another comment said, I was wary about Ineos coming in to begin with. I wanted the full sale. I was very clear on that. I was a bit nervous about Jim Ratcliffe allowing the Glazers to stay, but bringing in Omar Barada and Dan Ashworth would be the big statement and big impression. Obviously, actions speak louder than words. We'll see what happens, but been encouraged by early signs of Ineos. And it was then said by Samuel Luckhurst just now, Dan Ashworth would have to serve a lengthy spell of gardening leave if he wants to join United, similar to Omar Barada. But there's a feeling that United are willing to pay compensation to delay this gardening leave as well. It's said that there's been no fallout between Dan Ashworth and Newcastle, but they feel that the lure of the Man United project has got to his head as well. It would now be very intriguing to see how Manchester United approach the summer transfer window. Very intriguing indeed. Guys, 400 watching, 139 likes. Can we hit 150 likes? That would be massive. We ain't going for big name signings to start with, as we are looking to spread the money out. Omar had a policy at City Group of only spending a set amount for each position. You're absolutely spot on, Juddy, here. The new vision at United, I think, right now, and Omar Barada's made it clear, is if we have 50 million put away for that centre-back position and Everton start claiming 70 million for Jared Branthwaite, we'll just say F off and we'll go for Inacio with a £48 million release clause to be that left centre-back position. Omar Barada has a set budget. He might say 40 million left centre-back, 50 million right centre-back. He might just say 90 million for two centre-backs. He might say 40 million for DM. He might say 50 million for right winger. He might say 30 million for striker. And we will look to get one of those players in each of those positions within budget. And if they're not within budget, we don't do that. Or we might go for an alternative. They almost got Harry Maguire, but as soon as he went over 60 million, Omar Barada said, we're not spending more than 60 million on Harry Maguire. They went and got Ruben Diaz. There was many players that City almost did that they ended up walking away from. So 100%, yeah, absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on. And I think that will be the way that the United rebuild moves and really, really pushes forward as well. You might want to rethink your title, as anyone who owns 51% of any company in control. Ratcliffe will have football control as long as the Glazers allow it. Yeah, but the Glazers have officially lost control in that sense of they no longer are in primary control of United. They've also given up business control. But yeah, if I could fit 100 characters in the title, I would say lose sporting control, but you can only have a certain amount of characters in a title. But I get what you're saying as well. Bish bash bosh to everybody in the chat. 4 months of the transfer window open, would say Max Dan has to give is 3 months. Potentially, I do think we won't get any interesting transfer news this month, but I do think coming into late March, I think there could be some really interesting transfer reports and news regarding Manchester United as well. Guys, please do hit the like button. Of course, subscribe down below if you're new. Gary Neville's been very praising of Delo, and I have to say Delo is a player that has massively impressed me recently at United. We are 22 subscribers away from 78k as well, so it'd be really appreciated if new people subscribe. 75% Glazers, 25% Ineos. Glazers out. Glazers actually own 51%, I believe, if that is correct, actually. And that 51% is split between 6 Glazer siblings. So the person that officially owns the most of United is Ratcliffe, because while the Glazers as a collective own 51%, the Glazers themselves only really own 8% each, whereas Ratcliffe will own, obviously, 25% as well. It's 49%, as Judy said. That is absolutely right as well. Great stuff. Glazers not in control. Glazers officially lose control as well. What do you think about Elise and Neto? Are they talk? I think Elise and Neto are being looked at. I think when you look at Omar Barada, you look at Dan Ashworth, who are likely to come in and make those decisions at United, and the profile of player they will go through. You know, Manchester City wanted to sign Elise last summer. I think that Elise and Neto are probably genuine targets, and as we spoke about earlier, I think United want to go for, and the new regime under Ineos will be going for Premier League proven players that aren't going to be £100 million players, but £50 million players that are young, that can improve, that can kick on. I think that will be the new vision at Manchester United. That will be the new plan. That will be the new identity, and I think that is something that is massively needed at, of course, Manchester United. I think we need to change everything we do. It's not about panic loan deals. It's not about short-term deals. I think Man United have been a club in the past where everything has been so short-term. I feel like every deal we do is, let's do a short-term loan. Let's do a panic deal. Short-term striker comes in. Man United have never actually, in the last 10 years since Sir Alex Ferguson's left, really instilled a long-term project. How many of Ten Hag signings have been loans? How many of Ten Hag signings have been 30 plus? Well, let's actually look at Ten Hag signings and discuss which of Ten Hag's players are really long-term signings, which of Ten Hag's players are long-term project signings, what percentage of them are long-term project signings. Let me share my screen with you here. Reguilon, that's one player wasn't long-term, Amrabat, 2 players wasn't long-term, and 3, Bayendier was the second goalkeeper. So you've got Reguilon and Amrabat that were loans, and Bayendier that's a goalkeeper. That's 3 that weren't long-term. Højlund is long-term, Anana is long-term, so that's 3 non-long-term to 2 long-term. Johnny Evans is not long-term, so that's 4 non-long-terms. Mason Mount is long-term, so that's 4-3. Sabitzer wasn't long-term, so that's 5-3. Wout Weghorst wasn't long-term, so that's 6-3. Jack Butland wasn't long-term, so that's 7-3. Martin Dubravka wasn't long-term, so that's 8-3. Anthony was long-term, so that's 8-4. Casemiro wasn't long-term because of his age, so that's 9-4. Lissandro Martinez was long-term, so that's 9-5. Christian Eriksen, because of his age and free transfer, wasn't long term, so that's 10-5. And Malacia was long term, so that's 6-10. If you look at all of Ten Hag's signings here that he's brought in, 10 of them were short-term deals, players that weren't going to be in the long-term plan, and 6 of them were long-term signings. So you're saying 10 out of 16 signings, 10 out of 16 signings, 10 out of 16 as a percentage. What is that? Well, that must be 63%. 63% of Ten Hag signings haven't been long-term signings with that long-term vision as well. That's crazy. That's crazy. And I think that Man United, with Dan Ashworth coming in, with Ineos coming in, finally will hopefully instill that long-term vision that needs to be instilled into Manchester United as well. Alice, they're also looking at some players with 1 year left on their contracts, as Judy Sport. 100% is what's been read as well. I know Kimmich has, I know Thuram has, Alphonso Davies has. There's some other ones. That guy, was it Wolfsburg? Is it Danso? I think he's got 1 year left. He looks quite good. Thuram was the most notable one for Fana of Monaco, who Fabrizio Romano confirmed. We actually tried to get him on loan before we got Amrabat in summer as well. So yeah, lots of interesting stuff going on as well. So, but as you can see here, when you look at Manchester United signings, most of them haven't been long term. Most of them were loans. Most of them were over a certain age, and that is something that I think Ineos will come in and say, look, this is what we need to change. This is important. This is the way that we need to go. And for me, that's the most important thing. I'm trying to look at everything with a positive approach. I'm trying to look at everything that United are going to do and plan to do from now on with this sort of positive approach, because I think you can be negative about Man United for so long before it gets to you. The season's been poor. The season's a write-off. I'm trying to look at everything with the best approach, and I'm hoping that, Ineos do come in and Dan Ashworth comes in and Omar Barada comes in, and this is the start of a new and hopefully successful era at Manchester United. Max age we should be looking at in terms of signings of players should be in that 26 to 27-year-old range, players who could be breaking into their peaks but could slot into the side perfectly. And I absolutely agree. Enough of these players. I mean, look at the age of these signings here. I mean, should we Google the age of our signings? So Reguilon is 27. Amrabat is 27 when we signed him. Bayendier doesn't really count. Højlund is young, but Johnny Evans is 35. Sabitzer was a loan. Weghorst was a loan, but Casemiro was 30. Eriksen's 30. You look at the age of the signings on the Ten Hag as well. It's absolutely madness. Absolutely madness. Just no long-term strategy, no thinking, and this is again one of the reasons that I've been very positive around Ten Hag, and I've not become Ten Hag out, and I've been patient with Ten Hag, is because I think, well, yes, Ten Hag wants to spend 60 million on Mount and 85 million on Anthony, and I can't get my head around that. If there was proper people at Man United, we wouldn't be spending 85 million on Anthony, we wouldn't be spending 60 million on Mount. We'd be doing competent recruitment, which would mean that we don't have to do these loan deals, these panic deals, these without Weghorst signings, we'd be running more effectively, which is why I don't blame Ten Hag for Anthony and Mount like other people do. I don't want to do that as well. It was said by the coach's voice that Dan Ashworth, on his role at Brighton when he was a part of them, he said, "My role at Brighton," this has come from Dan Ashworth, "was to oversee the football side of the club and connect to different departments. I'm at the centre of the wheel, connecting the 7 football bubbles at the end of the spokes," is what Dan Ashworth described his role at Brighton to be like as well. Those age of Ten Hag's long-term signings are Leacher, who's 26, Mount 25, and Hoyland 21 as an example. We need players in those bracket 100% as well. Stop going for these old players. Regardless of maybe having to wait months for Barada, Ashworth, they won't even stop working. They'll be doing prep work way in advance of the summer window. We shouldn't worry too much. Absolutely agree. I think they're the best in class for their jobs. They'll be prepared. I think they'll have an idea. They're experienced. And I think even if they're not fully committed to United because they've got other jobs to do, I guarantee you they'll be thinking and doing a better job than Murta and everybody in the chat. Big up Daniel, big up everybody in the chat. If we have Ashworth, we could get Potter and De Zerbi. I think a decision on Ten Hag will be made at the end of the season. I think the players know that, and I think the players may step up and massively fight for Ten Hag, because I do genuinely believe that those current players at Manchester United do like Ten Hag, they do rate Ten Hag, they will be willing to fight for Eric Ten Hag as well. It was said that by many sources that Manchester United want an elite sporting director, and obviously Dan Ashworth has seen as that. They also want to bring in Brailsford. They want to bring in the best in class in all positions, and that Man United do have big plans, which is increasingly important, which is what sources are saying, if that makes sense as well. But big up everybody that's tuned in today's show. It's been a really good show. I don't want Potter either. I would rather stick with Ten Hag. We'll have to wait and see what Ineos decide to do, what happens with Ten Hag. I think Potter isn't as bad as he was at Chelsea, but I think he'd struggle in the environment of United. But you never know. Dan Ashworth, Omar Barada could create a new culture at United of positivity. And, Graham Potter in the right culture and environment could thrive, because I think he's a good manager. But I would rather stick with Ten Hag than go for Graham Potter as well. I honestly believe the decision to move on Eric Ten Hag has been made potentially as well. Dan Ashworth changed the manager at the other clubs he's worked at, so wouldn't put it past him. But listen, people, brilliant live show. Really happy with this live show. I think we've got through a lot of info. I think there were some really good chats and conversations. I think we gave a lot of detail to our points as well. So big up everyone for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Bye.